Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Classroom Hacks newest installment for the Insta-Activity section here on YouTube. And today, this Insta-Activity is going to focus on a class lesson, or I like to use this as an icebreaker in my classes. This is the privilege assignment sheet. Why I like to use it as a sort of first day icebreaker in class is primarily because it's easy just to kind of go around the room, ask everyone their name, one or two questions, whatever it is, 2 lies and a truth, tell us something about yourself, why you're here. But one thing that this particular exercise does is that it gives students the opportunity to sort of go inward and do some reflection, but then also gives them the opportunity to talk with other students and find out a bit more about them and to go on a deeper level. And in our culture today, looking at the term privilege, we oftentimes associate it just with white privilege. But what this particular lesson does is it allows us to sort of break down privilege in a variety of different ways and then sort of examine the ways in which the different areas in life we are privileged, such as being entirely physically healthy, not having to worry about working multiple jobs, all the way down to being able to provide an education for ourselves and a family. All these little things that we potentially take for granted on a day-to-day basis, we might find out that the person sitting right across from us, our fellow classmates in class, might be dealing with something that maybe we've never had to deal with or that we take for granted on a regular basis. And so it allows students to sort of see each other as people, and then it kind of removes the stigma of statistics away from other people. And so that when we see each other as human beings, it then opens up an environment and fosters an environment where we're no longer just seeing preconceived notions of one another. We're now seeing each other as individuals, real people with real problems, real plights that maybe we can all share in and talk about and have civilized and critical conversations. But before we get into the Insta-Activity privilege assignment, I just wanted to say we are live from the Pantheon of Pedagogy, the Mecca of methodology. This is your vacation from vacation with your tutorial tour guides. This is and we are Classroom Hacks. And on today's episode of Insta-Activity, this is the privilege assignment. And so where this all started was a while back. I was doing the typical 2 truths and a lie. How do we get to know each other? A few questions here and there. Pick a question out of a hat. Tell us about yourself, sort of icebreaker for the first day of class. Now, I then wanted to figure out a way, well, how can I get students to not only look at each other on a deeper level, invest in each other on a deeper level, but to also create an initial environment that fosters deep thinking, critical thought, and then can also create a place where students see each other as people and help understand the human condition. And one day, as I've done different discussions about privilege in class, I saw this privilege quiz on BuzzFeed, and it was 100 different questions about the ways in which we are privileged. And if you simply type in privilege quiz on Google, you'll find the BuzzFeed quiz here, how privileged are you? Now, you can either send students here to this particular site, or what I've done is I essentially copied and pasted everything here and I put it into a document. And then they also have a privilege scorecard for you to sort of utilize at the end. I then couple that with my own sort of questions from an assignment sheet that I have in regards to exploring privilege, which kind of helps sort of allows them to go deeper and asking them questions about where they've either felt privileged in their life or where they felt underprivileged. I also then ask them about if they feel that discrimination, whether large or small, subtle or grand, still exists in our culture. And then I have them take the privilege quiz. Now, for those of you who might be in shorter classes, this is oftentimes something where if I had an online class or a class that was only 50 minutes, I might have them do this as a homework assignment and then come back the next day and then we would talk about it. But for classes that are longer, anywhere from an hour and 15 to 2 hours plus, I would do this in class And then I'd have us sit down and I'd have them either talk about it in groups or just sort of talk about it as a class as a whole. And this way, everyone sort of gets to go through their different sort of privileges. You could even divide them up after they've taken the quiz into who's been highly privileged, medium, and then underprivileged, and then have them sort of talk about that in any way. It's up to you to decide which way you want to go with it. But what's nice is that you have a few options to work with. And so let's say, for example, we were using this in a class that was over an hour and we had more than enough time to sort of sit down and have the actual conversation. What I do is I have them take this quiz. Basically, they would just go through it and either highlight or X off whichever one of these statements essentially they associate with. So if they're white, they would simply highlight, I'm white. I've never been discriminated against because of my skin color. Whichever one applies to you, you simply highlight. And then after you've gone through all 100 of these, you would then go to your privilege scorecard to identify what level of privilege you sort of fall under. Now, why I find this particular exercise useful, especially in an opening and icebreaker class, is because in our current culture, as I sort of alluded to earlier, we've gotten so connected to the idea that if you are white, you are automatically privileged. And we've obviously come to find out that being white does have certain privileges, but it's not the only privilege that exists out there. There are plenty of white people who are underprivileged in a variety of other ways, and there's plenty of minorities who are privileged in a variety of other ways. And so what this particular sort of quiz does, it allows us to sort of go inward and sort of digest all the areas that maybe we've never had to consider because we have those particular elements of privilege. Like, for example, I am heterosexual. I've never had to come out about my sexuality. I feel comfortable in the gender I was born in. I've never had to try to hide my gender or change my gender. I've never been catcalled. I work in a salaried job. I don't have any student loans. I've never gone to bed hungry. All the way to my parents are still both alive. My parents are still married. I've never had to take a car to work. So a lot of these things that we've never really had to consider, and even going down to like being both physically, mentally, and spiritually healthy. Some people don't even take that into consideration. But we take these quizzes and we realize, holy cow, I actually have even more privileges than I thought I had, or I thought I had more privileges, but I'm actually pretty underprivileged. And what this quiz is essentially designed to do, it's not to necessarily call you out and say, oh, you're super privileged, therefore you're an a-hole. But as I explained to my students, when we know and we come face to face with some of the things we are privileged with, that instead of writing off other people and saying that, you just need to buckle down and raise up your bootstraps and put in the hard work, maybe realize that there's opportunities in our life that we were granted that they haven't been. They maybe have to go through one or two extra hurdles on a daily basis that we don't even have to worry about. And then we can actually have these conversations and start to understand that when it comes to discrimination, when it comes to prejudice, that these are things that perhaps they do feel, and sometimes they feel them consciously, where people are directly pointing these things at them. And then sometimes maybe they feel these things unconsciously because culture tends to look the other way, or they don't consider these things because they have a certain level of privilege that other people don't have. And so I found that when my students actually sit down with one another and have these conversations, I've heard different dialogues and discussions where students have said, I never really had to think about what it would be like to come out to my parents and then potentially have them, dismiss me or disregard me or banish me from the family in some cases. I've never had to worry about taking multiple buses just to get to school. I was always lucky enough just to have a car and get in there and jump to school and make it on time. And I've never had to worry about not being able to walk up a flight of stairs because I'm not in a wheelchair. I don't have to use crutches. I'm physically healthy. And see, these are all things that oftentimes students and ourselves, we do take for granted. And when we understand how people have to go through those things, especially later on in the semester, when I have students do like group projects and I talk about micromanaging and things like that and accountability, that this brings back to mind and this recollection of well, I remember Regina telling me that she has to take several means of transportation just to get to school, so I shouldn't be so hard on her if she gets here a little late. Or I remember Tom telling me that he deals from PTSD, or he deals with depression or anxiety. So I probably shouldn't be too harsh on him if he needs a moment just to step out. And so these are things that people can recall upon. They can understand each other a bit better. And I feel that this definitely takes the idea of the first day get to know you sort of icebreaker a lot deeper. It gives students a much sort of, obviously much more comprehensive sort of understanding of their classmates. And again, once we can see each other as people and understand each other a bit better, this allows us to have stronger and deeper conversations without necessarily the fear of not knowing one another and having sort of armor up or defenses up when we're talking. And then we can actually get to the root of a lot of future conversations when we see each other as people and not just statistics or members of a different tribe. So this was the Insta-Activity for today. I hope this particular activity helps you. Like I said, you can find this if you simply Google privilege quiz. It's the BuzzFeed quiz. There are different levels and different types of privilege quizzes, but I like this one because there's 100 questions and it allows you to sort of see different elements of privilege. It also comes with a privilege scorecard where you can kind of go through the different types of privilege that students might have. And like I said, if you want to know what the questions were that I talked about earlier, you can either just pause on this page and you can kind of see what questions I used that I coupled with this particular assignment to get the conversation to go even deeper. Obviously, if there's other questions you think that would be beneficial or helpful, please let us know in the comments or on our social media. I hope this has been a helpful Insta-Activity for you, and it gives you some sort of reprieve if you are in need of an assignment on the go, or if you're in need on something relatively quickly at the beginning of the semester and you want to either use it, like I said, as an icebreaker or as an initial homework assignment or an actual sit down if you have a longer class to sort of discuss these things. So until next time, fellow hacks, it's never goodbye. It's always until we meet again. Have a good one, and I hope this helps.